Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome all intercessors who may be watching this video, as well as all my Vineyard peeps that have joined me in this journey of praying for the 7 mountains of influence for our great United States of America. Today I felt compelled to put out a clarion call that would let you know the importance of the prayers that we have been petitioning the Lord since the beginning of May. Actually, since April. We started praying for governmental leaders, and then in May I felt like the Lord compelled me to begin to pray for the 7 mountains of influence. And we have joined every single Monday night since then at 7 p.m. to pray for those vertical peaks that affect all societies, including the businesses, government, family, religion, media, education, and entertainment. We have agreed on certain prayer points and have also allowed the Spirit of the living God to lead us to pray specifically within these areas. And in doing so, day after day and month after month, it's easy to see how we can get a myopic view while even understanding the areas of influence and how they have deteriorated in our society. You have heard me mention the name Lance Wallnau. He's a proponent in the ministry of the 7 mountains, which God actually commissioned Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham back in 1975 to empower and equip leaders outside the 4 walls of the church, bringing the heart of God to the 7 mountains of influence. Why would God bring this message separately to these 2 individuals that shared a friendship and just happened to be traveling to the same city at the same time with the same message from God for one another? If not for the fact that since the beginning, God intended all people who are called by His name to have dominion over all the earth. That is stated in Genesis 1:26. Through the years, however, the people of God have grown comfortable. We have not truly been concerned with praying, and certainly not praying for the 7 mountains of influence. We have allowed unbelievers to take leadership positions within these areas of influence. We have voted in leaders in government positions that have brought their own beliefs, their own agendas, their own power, and they've acted on these and have not aligned themselves with God's purposes for the purpose of individual lives and a society as a whole. So I'm gathering you today to try to share a bigger picture. This is a message that my husband Ed preached in 2017, and a message that I heard on Lance Wallnau's Firewall program. And it is based on petitioning the courts of heaven. As I listened to Robert Henderson and Lance Wallnau discuss this important revelation, it compelled me to share with you so that you may understand how important your prayers are and how effective, not only to a single area or a specific mountain, but they're effective towards a global positioning of nations. You see, the 7 mountains of influence don't only control our nation, but they control the nations. The church, as we know it now, and even back in the Clinton and Bush years, entered a time of peace and prosperity, and has unfortunately grown inward focused. Building their own ministries, building huge buildings, and providing every type of program just to entice people to come in to hear the gospel. And while all of this has been taking place, the enemy has come to influence the 7 mountains. And unbelieving leaders have been allowed to take over the nation's areas of influence. For example, let's take education. Academia has influenced 50 million kids with thoughts that America is a racist country, and there's been a promotion of a hatred for America, that we need to tear down our country as it is and rebuild it. And what have the results been? These colleges and universities have put out so many kids with this message, and now we are seeing the hatred in the riots, in the looting, and in the destruction happening in various states. The area of media is another area of influence that has become so dark, lying about anything that doesn't fit their own agenda and denying anything that points to corruption, injustice, or wrongful doing on their behalf. You know, in the past, godly men like Martin Luther, Calvin, and Bonhoeffer were men that preached the fundamentals, the foundation of the gospel. They preached the word of God. They preached on prayer. But they never shied away from talking about cultural issues. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as a matter of fact, was a Lutheran pastor, and he was so anti-Nazi to the point that had he had an opportunity to kill Hitler, he would have. Unfortunately, he was hung for his beliefs. So what is the church doing about all this? Are we still growing our own 4 walls? The church has not been warring against the progressive leftist agenda, and we have not been promoting God's agenda for the nations. We need to understand the critical time that we are facing and embrace a higher understanding that is the courts of heaven. We need to petition the courts of heaven. Our prayers have been contending for the changing of our culture to keep the United States strong, not just for America itself, but also understand that if the United States remains strong, it fights against the globalization of the world. Many of our past leaders have attempted to weaken America by doing deals with communistic China and nations that do not like America, that try to take advantage of the United States. While discussing this topic, Robert Henderson and Lance Wallnau on his Firewall Facebook video, both men are very prophetic revelators, and they believe that Donald J. Trump is the wrecking ball needed to keep the United States in a strong position to stand against the one world order. To stand for territorial independence of our nation and nations that are fighting to stay independent, and those that desire to preserve their Christian values, standing against the enemy and standing for the purposes of God. You know, in the Bible, when Cyrus became the great king of Persia, Daniel showed him the prophetic word in Isaiah 45. And he was prompted by God to decree that the temple in Jerusalem should be rebuilt, and that such Jews that cared to might return to their land for that purpose. And people did begin to return to Jerusalem to build the house of prayer, the temple for the Lord. But only after 2 years, they decided to stop. Why did they stop? Because personal issues began to take their focus. There became a time of peace and a time of contentment. Then a plague came, and it wiped out all their agriculture and took all their money. Listen to that. Is that something we can take in for such a time as this? You see, all synagogues were connected to the temple. And in Haggai, God states through this prophet, "Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? Give careful thought to your ways." Listen, church, give careful thought to your ways. "Go up into the mountain and bring down timber and build my house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored." We must build a house that covers all 7 mountains of influence. We must pray and build a house for our nation. Not our own houses, not our own ministries, but one for the Lord, with the purposes of the Lord, so that He may be honored. One that will cover and allow the culture to take dominion for the Lord. In Genesis, why did God destroy Sodom? Many would say because of their sin. But maybe a better question would be, why did God not spare Sodom? Maybe it was because they failed to pray and build a house for the Lord, where He could be honored and where mercy could be poured out. You know, this is where Abraham begins to negotiate with the Lord. And he says, if there was only 40 righteous people, would you spare Sodom? And they go back and forth, 30, 20, and they stop at 10. Why the number 10? Because 10 happens to be a very significant number. It speaks of God's government. We know that God gave 10 commandments. We know that there were 10 plagues. We know that the Passover lamb was to be sacrificed on the 10th day of the first month. We know that the tithe is a 10. And we as people and children of God have 10 fingers and 10 toes. God is looking for His church to take its rightful place on Mount Zion, the holy mountain of God, so that we can usher in His purposes and allow Him to shift the nation as He wishes, the nations as He wishes. The will of God's kingdom, not the will of the enemy. We must continue to pray and build a house of prayer for the Lord so that the nation's culture can begin to turn back to Him. You know, this current president has been the most hated leader of the United States that I can remember. And I'm pretty old now. The establishment, leaders in government don't like him. The media hates him. There's been lies and deception and hexes and vexes that have tried to bring this man down. And yet he continues to cry out that this country is the greatest country in all of the world. And today, for the first time, his campaign slogan really touched me. Make America great again. Just like Cyrus was commissioned to rebuild the temple and make the temple great again. Make America great again. I find that extremely prophetic, especially when you consider the spirit realm. He is considered by many of today's prophets as a modern-day Cyrus, commissioned by God to rebuild His house, God's house, in the United States of America. This coming Saturday, October 31st, best known in our culture for a celebration of ghouls and goblins, known as the holiday of Halloween. But you should know as a Christian that it is also Reformation Day. Lance Wallnau and other religious leaders will be gathering to pray and petition the courts of heaven and the judge of heaven and earth, and cry out for the changing of our nation and the re-election of Donald J. Trump. This should be a day celebrated by all Christians as the Day of Reformation. And you may ask, well, what is the Day of Reformation? In 1517, Martin Luther posted his 95th thesis, which contained revolutionary opinions that began the Protestant Reformation to get a message to the Catholic Church against several practices that were considered to be biblically wrong. Lance and others will be praying from 6 to 9 in Washington, D.C. on the Mall this Saturday. I want to invite our small group to join in with the larger church and pray that God, the judge of heaven and earth, will have mercy upon the United States and begin to change our culture. You know, in the book of Daniel, chapter 6, it states that Daniel removed the obstacles from his window so that he could stand and face in the direction of Jerusalem. Let's stand together this Saturday for at least 30 to 60 minutes. And wherever you are, face in the direction of Washington, D.C. and petition God for His purpose and for His plans to come to pass this election day. Our group may be very small, but I want you to be informed, and I want you to understand the importance of gathering together in the name of the Lord and petitioning for His kingdom to come and for His will to be done. You can find out more about the rally at asonerally2020.com. God bless you, and may God in His great mercy bless the United States of America. Have a good night.